A series of questions before we get to sort of our moral of the story. Like, what does this all mean? These may seem like random questions, or they may add up in the end, which is what I'm hoping. It starts out, the Steelers' offensive drought and 5-game losing streak to end the season strangely started 1 week after Russell Wilson had the second-best game of his decorated career. This was December 1st at Cincy. Bob, I already disagree with the premise there. So let me ask you, does that opening line make sense? The Steelers' offensive drought did not start after the Bengals game on December 1st. It started in the 2 games before the Bengals game on December 1st, one of which was a horse bleep performance in Cleveland, where they scored 19 points and where Tomlin had a frozen quarterback throw one of the biggest passes of the game. And then they came back with no touchdowns against the Ravens.
Right, that was one of those games that you question what was going on offensively.
So the Steelers' offensive drought started before the Bengals game, not after.
It did. But the Bengals game is the one game, apparently, according to all of this, that Russell Wilson, maybe frustrated from the previous 2 weeks, took it into his own hands. My biggest question is, where did this story come from? Who's leaking what?
Well, where do you think?
Could be the agents. Agents have a big role in a lot what goes on, especially if you are trying to get a new job and you don't have a contract. And maybe they're, pointing it out that if people want to take a shot at my client, I'm going to tell you that wasn't his fault because he wanted to do stuff and he was restricted to do it. I don't know. I mean,
maybe the story is that Russell Wilson isn't good enough anymore, or maybe the story is that Mike Tomlin, believing that, simply lost trust in him. Or maybe the story is part of it, at least, is in the next paragraph here, where Dulac says the Steelers' offense after that 44-point game mysteriously changed and went into a funk. Could the funk be explained by the fact that they were no longer playing the Raiders and the Jets and the Giants anymore?
That has something to do with it,
crazy
too.
Stab there. But they suddenly were playing. And again, keep in mind, the slump started before the Bengals game. But after the Bengals game, during their 5-game losing streak to end the season, they played 4 of the top 10 scoring defenses in football. Eagles, Chiefs, Ravens twice, once in the playoffs. And even the Bengals, Bob, by the second time around, were a completely different team. Over their last 5 games, the Bengals allowed 18 points per game, which would have been top 5 or 6 in the whole NFL over the season. So this idea that there's some big mystery behind why the Steelers' offense sucked in the last 5 games, is it really that mysterious? That would be another question for you.
Yeah, I honestly, the way it was going and how they were getting out-schemed on a lot of them, that's what we spent a lot of time talking about on our post-game shows and call-in shows on TV is they seem to be getting out-coached in a lot of those games. They weren't putting the players in the right position to make plays, both offensively and defensively.
And they were playing a higher caliber of talent.
And when the talent obviously matters there. So does the coaching in those situations. So no, to me it coincides with a lot of who they played at the end of the season as well. That's not to make an excuse because other teams had the same schedule and they went 3-0 against them.
For sure. I'm simply, when we're looking for explanations or when we're throwing it out there that, wow, this Steelers offense was riding high, and then suddenly they stripped Russ of his ability to change plays, and the offense went in the toilet. That seems to be a one-for-one explanation there that I'm not buying. I'm just not buying all of that explanation. Now, regardless of the reasons why the offense went into the toilet and got flushed, Bob, it's still a gigantic story. It's a gigantic story.
Well, it sets the tone for what's going to happen perhaps in the next several weeks.
Yes.
And what they do with their quarterback situation.
Exactly. And it starts with the fact that this is now the second time that Mike Tomlin, I'm not putting this on coordinators, whether it's Matt Canada or Arthur Smith. It's the head coach's team. It's in many ways the head coach's franchise. He's a co-CEO with Art Rooney. He's the de facto defensive coordinator. He's the deciding voice on draft picks. He leads their contingent at the Senior Bowl. My God, does he have a stake in the franchise? It's a Mike Tomlin franchise here.